Recently I got a comment asking about my D&D house rules, so I thought I'd run through those with you guys, give you a little glimpse into how I run my games. Let's start with a really simple one. Number 1, health potions are a bonus action. The title for this one is a little misleading. When you drink a potion in one of my games, you can either drink it as a bonus action, and then you roll for the health like normal, or you can use a full action to drink it and heal for the maximum health that that potion can give you. I got this from a TikTok like a year ago, and sadly I can't remember who made that TikTok, but either way, the idea behind this one is that when you use it as a bonus action, it's rushed and you're spilling some of it, but when you use it as a full action, you're taking your time and making sure to get every last drop. I like that it gives my players a choice. If they're low on health but they think the boss is also low, maybe they'll risk the bonus action and only get some health back so that they can then use their action to attack. Number 2, you can cast multiple spells in one turn. In 5e, you can't cast 2 spells in one turn. There are exceptions to this, of course, like with Action Surge, but to me there is one thing that should be an exception that isn't. For some reason, when you used Quicken Spell to cast a spell as a bonus action, you can't cast another leveled spell as your action. I think this is dumb, and so in my games, you can cast 2 leveled spells if one of those spells is Quicken Spelled. I got this rule from Baldur's Gate 3, because that's how Quicken Spell works in that game, and I thought it was way cooler. I like that it gives sorcerers and anyone that takes the Metamagic Adept feat just a little bit more versatility. Number 3, starting feats and magic items. Most of my games start off between levels 3 and 5, so all of my players get to pick a feat that makes sense for their character, like if somebody trained as a combat mage, they could take Warcaster, and they also get to take an uncommon or common magic item. The magic item is usually worked into their backstory in some way, but I find that explaining how they got the magic item is oftentimes way less important than how they got the feat. Number 4, critting on skill checks. In 5e, you can only critically fail or succeed on attack rolls. I, along with a large portion of the D&D community, think that's silly, so my players can critically succeed on skill checks and saving throws. They aren't instant successes though, like an attack is. A nat 20 on a skill check means you achieve the best possible outcome, within reason. That's the important part. So, if you roll a nat 20 on a persuasion check to get a king to give you his kingdom, I would almost never allow someone to make that check, but stay with me. He wouldn't give you the kingdom, but he might give you a quest to become a knight of the kingdom or some sort of advisor to the crown. Likewise, if you roll a nat 1 on a check, you get the worst possible outcome within reason. Using that same persuasion check as an example, if you rolled a nat 1 instead, maybe the king would have thrown you out of the kingdom for disrespecting the crown, or worse, he sends the guards to execute you. Number 5, learning skills. I let my players earn tool proficiencies by making the check with whatever tool they're trying to learn. So, if one of my players is trying to learn jewelry making, they'd make a check with jeweler's tools, and if they succeed, they mark 1 space on a 10 pip track. They can make this check once per week, and if they're in a bastion room that uses that type of tool, like a smithy or a workshop, they get advantage on the check to represent the fact that they have good tools and good equipment at their disposal, and that they have someone nearby who can help them out. Before we go any further, I want to take a brief intermission to say that I know some of these rules will give players pretty big advantages, but I'm okay with that. Most of my house rules are introduced because my players like doing crazy shit, so I give them the tools that they need to do that crazy shit. My first time ever DMing, I messed up some planning, and my players almost 2-rounded a boss that was supposed to stick around for the entire campaign. I had to have the BBEG intervene at that point so that this smaller boss wouldn't die. And well, that was definitely a learning experience for me, and I've since learned how to properly balance encounters. I still remember how my players felt in that first campaign, where things were heavily in their favor. And I think I've now found a balance where the players have all the tools that they need to be absolutely busted, but the game is still challenging. Okay, jumping off that last rule, let's talk about rule number 6, crafting. The reason I implemented rule 5 is because I started using Kibble's crafting compendium at my table, and the players that didn't already have proficiency in these tools wanted to use the system. So I gave them rule number 5 so that they could. Kibble's Crafting Compendium is an amazing book. The book has recipes for every item in the core rules, including like a fair amount of homebrew items. And I found that my players have been way more involved with stuff outside of their main quests since they've started working towards specific items that they want to make, which is great. Like one person, he's playing this little mushroom guy who's learning alchemy, and he has a book where he draws all of his plants so that he can learn about them in his own personal way. And if we didn't have this crafting system, and he wasn't working on that alchemy skill, this little character detail wouldn't be relevant and possibly never would have come up. Number 7. Rolling ability scores. Everyone does this differently, but the way I do it is you roll 46, you drop the lowest, and you reroll ones. I like the rerolling ones thing. It gives my players a better chance of having good scores, while not completely ruling out the possibility of having negatives. Number 8. Flanking. I hate flanking in D&D. It's so bad. It's part of why all fights in D&D look like that. And if I remember correctly, they do get rid of flanking in the 2024 edition of the rules. And when I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So I adopted it, and now my bosses get stomped way less, which is nice. I mentioned flanking in my video on Pathfinder, so if you want to see me talk about how much I loathe D&D's combat mechanics, go watch that video. Okay, we're about to get into some of the big stuff, so before I go any further, please subscribe. I'm hoping to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We just hit 100 very recently, so feels pretty attainable. This next thing is less of an actual house rule and more of just a stance, so it's not getting counted in this list. We're actually going to make a separate list called stances. So this is stance number 1. I love homebrew. I use a lot of homebrew between classes, subclasses, items, species. I sometimes make it myself, sometimes I go to different Patreons and get it from there. 2 that I use a lot are Gaming Brew for classes and subclasses, and the Griffin Saddlebag, mostly for items, but they do have some neat subclasses. The other thing that I let my players know is that if you want a specific subclass and it doesn't exist in any of the homebrew that we use or the official books, I'll make it. So far I've made 2, one of which being a water-based monk subclass that turns you into a speed demon, and the other is a wild magic warlock subclass. Okay, back to some more actual house rules. House rule number 9, stacking inspiration. I let my players stack inspiration because it lets them do more cool shit. I know some people use a variation of this rule where you can have up to 3 or 4 inspirations. I don't have that cap. You have as many inspirations as you have. A lot of my players will save their inspirations for these really important roles, and then when that role finally does happen, it's a debate on whether or not they should use all their inspirations. Is a 19 high enough, or should I use an inspiration? Oh, I just re-rolled and I got a 2. So I'll use another inspiration. That's a 17. I'm going to leave it there just in case, right? I also give out inspirations pretty liberally, usually 1 or 2 a session. It always happens for either really good roleplay moments, or if someone says something so funny that I have to stop DMing for a minute because I'm laughing so much. The thing to keep in mind about that, though, is that I do run adventure comedy games. If I was running a game that was very, very serious, I wouldn't reward people for making me laugh so much that I can't do anything for a minute. If I had to get rid of every single rule in this video and only keep 1 in my games, it'd be this one. Rule number 10, I don't track ammunition or spell components or encumbrance. This is probably one of the most common house rules ever because it just makes so much sense. Playing an archer character and you run out of arrows, that's annoying. At least when a spellcaster runs out of spell slots, they still have cantrips that they can use. But if you're a rogue who's only got a small dagger and a bow, the rest of this dungeon is going to be pretty rough. For encumbrance, I just don't like the rules for it. I don't want to worry about how much each item weighs in grams because inventory management isn't a concern for me or any of my players. Plus, a bag of holding is an uncommon item. In my game world, you can buy that in a magic shop in literally any major kingdom. For spell components, I just find them to be unnecessary, and I get that component pouches exist for a reason, but unless a spell component has a monetary value, like the incense for legend lore or a diamond for revivify, I assume my players are fully stocked on whatever spell components they need. And that's pretty much all of the house rules that I currently use, so I guess the video's over. Nah, I'm joking. You can see the runtime. I'm gonna go looking around in the depths of the internet to find some house rules so that I can bring them back here and tell you what I think of them. I'd also love to hear what house rules you use at your own table, so leave a comment telling me your favorite one. Internet rule number 1. spending an inspiration to retroactively do something. I got this one from a Reddit post, and the general idea is that you spend one of your inspirations and you describe an action you did in recent history, like buying rope, packing extra rations, locking a door, stuff like that. I think this is a fine rule. I doubt I'd use it personally, but I can definitely see the appeal. It can be difficult to remember to do everything when you stop to rest in a town, so having this rule is a nice trade-off, and it would definitely work well with my multiple inspirations rule that I use. My only problem with this rule is that I kind of feel like it's a waste of inspiration, but I could be entirely wrong. If you've ever used this rule in one of your games before, please let me know how it went. I would love to hear some stories. Internet rule number 2. I know a guy. So let's say your players are in an unfamiliar city and they're looking for an underground fighting ring. They have some clues as to where it would be, but they don't have any of the context for those clues. So the bard invokes I know a guy and says that there was a liar player that she used to tour with who she knows lives in this city. So they go and they find the liar player and ask him some questions. It's a pretty simple house rule that you can add a lot of flavor to. Maybe it costs an inspiration, maybe you only have one use per arc. I kind of like the idea of it being once per arc. Maybe you could have a homebrew feat called Connected that gives you another use of I know a guy per arc and also increases your charisma by 1 to a max of 20, like a standard half feat does. I'm kind of convincing myself to use this rule as I talk about it, so I think there's a pretty high chance of me adding this to my games. I don't even know what to call this one, honestly. Just take a look for yourself. I don't like any of this one. To be fair, though, I don't like a lot of the house rules that change dropping to 0. I know a lot of them are used to facilitate RP and have these epic moments, which I love, but I think that death saves and dropping to 0 are one of the things that D&D generally does well when it comes to combat. Speaking of death saves, internet rule number 4. Secret rolls. This is most commonly used for death saves where only the player and the GM know the outcome of a death save. I've used this as a PC a total of 2 times throughout my years of playing this game, and I get it. It definitely helps with metagaming, and it adds an extra level of fear to going down. But I personally like death saves being a spectacle. I bring out my fancy dice tower that we only use for important rolls, and everyone watches with bated breath. I will say that I have experimented with secret rolls in the past, specifically for insight checks, where I ask someone to tell me what they add to insight, and then I roll the dice behind my DM screen, and then tell them what they learn from the roll, instead of them knowing what number they got. And that also definitely helps with metagaming, but my players are already pretty good at not metagaming, so I barely ever feel the need to do this. The last rule I have here is crunchy crits. This rule exists because it's an absolute session ruiner to roll snake eyes on a crit. So, with this rule, you'll take the max damage on your standard damage dice and then roll the crit damage dice as normal. So if you've got a great axe, which deals 1d12, instead of rolling 2d12 when you crit, you would roll one of those d12s and treat the other damage dice like it had rolled a 12. I've been seeing this rule for a while now, and I have no clue why I still haven't used it, so I think going forward I am going to give it a try. And that's truly all I've got for this video. If there's any systems you'd like to see me talk about, leave a comment or message me on Blue Sky or Twitter. I've got all my socials in the channel bio, but they'll also be down in the description.